Hello, this is Antti Jogi Poikola. I'm the Vice Chair of MyData Global. I'm here today to tell you a little bit of my future visions of why personal data management is so important and about the concept called MyData operators. So, information is power. Here you can see a person. She's looking at the world with her eyes. She's gaining information from the world. There are some filters, in this case eyeglasses, in between the world and the perception that she makes in her head. So we can translate this conceptualization to the world of personal data and information services, platforms, social media, algorithms, etc. So more and more we behave and perceive the world through intermediaries that are filtering the information for us. That's the different digital tools that we are using every day. And of course the information that these tools are using is also influencing on the final perception that we get from the world. And it goes to the other direction as well. So these tools, systems and platforms, they are gathering information and data about us, and they are tuning the algorithms and services based on the information what they get from us. And this circle from information to filtering, perception, behavior, more information gathered and fed back to the information systems, that's the circle of power in the world of data. So why is it so important that we have some sort of understanding on who does and what about our personal data? That's because the data can be changing how we perceive the world, and it can change how do we behave. And the tricky thing is that it's quite subtle. You don't always realize how it works. If you go and browse, for example, Netflix, it's nice that you see a recommendation of good movies, but you don't actually perhaps perceive how these recommendations are done. And the same happens in your news sources and what kind of stories pop up on your social media, etc. And also what you purchase. That's the business behind personal data today. So advertising. So companies try to influence how people behave, change their behavior, especially in the commercial sense. So what would be fair data economy? So I think that fair data economy is such that it functions, it's functional, and it's fair for the people. Here I have listed a couple of positive and negative sides on those functionality and fairness for the people. So functional data economy is such that there is low barriers to access to the market. So no monopolies, etc. It incentivizes for all actors, it's open for competition, there are choice of products and services for variety of needs. And not so functional data economy would be such that has no transparency, it has monopolies and unfair competition, it has negative externalities, barriers to entry, instability and stagnation. So what would be fair for people? It would be such that people have data rights and privacy. It's inclusive, so no one is left behind, and there is feeling of purpose and security and dignity for people regarding their data. And unfair for people would be such that has corruption, neglecting human rights, there is labor exploitation, growing inequalities, no free choice and big power balances. If you look at these positive and negative sides and try to think, what is the dominant data economy today? Is it functional and is it fair? So I would say that economic centralization is quite strong. There is a strong mechanism where winner takes all. The big platforms gain all the customers and all the goodies, all the data as well. So not so much competition, or at least it's not easy competition. And also recently there has been lots of discussion to where these big platforms pay taxes or if they pay taxes at all. Is it fair for the people? I think not. It's big time run by advertising industry, so the cause is to influence our behavior without we knowing it. It's kind of surveillance economy if you take the terms of Zuzana Zuboff. I recommend the book Surveillance Economy. And privacy and data protections are always in danger in today's world. MyData is looking at building human-centric personal data management to solve some of these issues. Of course, there is no such thing as silver bullet solving all the problems at once. MyData aims for fair, sustainable and prosperous digital society through human-centric approach to personal data, and we see that it's both good for people and it's good for the organization. So people get value from their data, and they can set an agenda on how the data is being used. And at the same time, for organizations, the ethical use of data is always the most attractive option. MyData.org has published this declaration that crystallizes the key changes that are needed to make this sustainable and prosperous digital society. So we should be moving from formal to actionable rights. Formal rights means something that is being written in the law. I'm coming from Finland. We are living in the European Union, and Europe has set up the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which is quite famous on all over the world. A good piece of regulation, but it's not so clear whether people can actually execute their rights. So we need to have the tools supporting the formal rights that are coming from the legislation. And we also need to move from data protection to empowerment with data. What do I mean by that? It's like, for example, criminals that are put in jail. They are in a way protected. They have shelter, they have food, they have everything there, but they are not free to do anything. And the same goes with the data. It's not enough that we are protected and nothing bad happens to us because of our data, but we should be also free to do something good and beneficial for ourselves with our data. So people should be able to act with their data. And we also foresee the movement from closed to open ecosystems, so that the data economy is much more competed area in good sense, so that there are no monopolies. This is a way to visualize the second part from there, so moving from data protection to empowerment with data. We can see that there is this kind of two axes. One axis that goes how much data is being used, how well it's being used, and the other orthogonal axis is that how strong is the data protection. And here I think the European Commission GDPR legislation is setting the hallmark for data protection globally. And perhaps the big platforms are setting the hallmark of how efficiently data can be used. So can we get something from both axes, so that we climb up from the data protection towards good use of data? And there we see that MyData lies in the upper corner, where people can actually decide how to use their data, and that they are protected, but at the same time there is good utility of data. And we can see it also from the technical perspective that currently we are living in this kind of API ecosystem where several services are connected to each other. For example, I have 200 passwords in my password manager, and I know that many of these services are interconnected. The downside is that I have no idea where my data is flowing. So in this visualization, the person stays kind of aside on gray. But the problem is also that when some APIs are being changed, these connections get broken, so it's not very robust system also for the service builders. So this platform model, where there are bigger and bigger central entities that are connecting to several data sources, that makes it easy for developers of apps and services to tap on those good well-maintained interfaces, and they can easily go to many data sources. But again, people are still left aside. I don't really know how to control my data. In the end, we believe that people, we individuals, we should be our own platforms regarding our own data. So if somebody wants to offer me good service based on the data that is being collected from me, it should be me who can grant that kind of permission, or even I could go and ask, please could you do something beneficial for me if I give you my data. So we are looking this kind of human centricity in the also in the technical sense. So there are already good uptake from the human-centric approaches or MyData approaches on the governmental level in Europe, and now I also know that it's happening in Asia. So this is a piece coming from European Data Strategy that was published earlier in 2020. So MyData is recognized as one of the movements that promise significant benefits to individuals, including to their health and wellness, better personal finances, reduced environmental footprint, hassle-free access to public and private services, and greater oversight and transparency over their personal data. So this is what is said in the European Commission Data Strategy. And also some governments on state level have been taking these MyData approaches seriously. This one is coming from the Finnish government program that was published in 2019. There it says, we will provide an opportunity for individuals to manage their personal data in public information systems in accordance with MyData principle, and to give permission for their use in other services. The objective will be promoted by both national and international regulations. So here the Finnish government clearly sees that the governmental data resources that they are collecting from individuals, being it driver's license or your educational degrees or whatnot, these are important and valuable information sources that government wishes to free for people to use. So how to make this happen? I'm going to tell you about the MyData operators. This is a concept about interconnected and human-centric data intermediaries. So in order to make this kind of human-centric data economy happen, we need to have some sort of infrastructure that supports it. And by infrastructure, I really mean something that is common, something really base level for our digital society to work. So what would be the railroads or roads of today's world in digital era? So building such infrastructure, it needs to be based on standards. It cannot be fragmented, everybody building in different ways, and it also needs to have very good governance so that the human-centric principles are actually being followed. So the key challenges in building this human-centric organization of personal data can be seen coming from different angles. So business angle, how to make it economically sustainable, how to change the data modus operandi of the data economy of today's, which is now based on the advertisement. Could it be based something else? How to build a robust business? How to make technically feasible so that we actually take into use the best modern technologies to make such an infrastructure, and also then having the legal or contractual and regulation part supporting the action. And all these, business, legal and technology, they should be aiming at to create socially good outcomes. So it's not enough that we have something that is legal and technically possible and good business, because that might be actually quite bad for the society. So we really need to keep an eye that it creates good outcomes on the societal level. So MyData operators, they are trusted intermediaries, and this is by no means new thing. Data intermediaries on personal data side, they have been discussed, developed and practiced over 20 years. The first ones being intermediaries from the late 90s. There are VRM, vendor relationship management, life management platforms, PDS, personal data stores, personal data information services, PIMS, etc., etc. And what we call MyData operators, the key is that, okay, they are intermediaries, but we are facilitating personal data ecosystems. We think it from the ecosystem perspective. We don't want to create platforms that are separate and individual from each other. I go a little bit deeper to the ecosystem thinking. So nowadays, personal data is still being managed in value chains that are closed. So the same organizations pretty much collects the data, manages what to do with it, and uses it. And integrating data from multiple sources is still very hard. We can think of, for example, bank. They collect our data about our purchases, they know all the money transactions that go in, but they don't really give a possibility for us to get that data in usable manner, at least in most parts of the world, and all the value is pretty much lost. So there is very little use for that data. There could be something like personal finances, dashboards, and that kind of stuff developed by others than the bank, but these are still very early days for this kind of systems. We see that in the future there should be personalized, specialized services for different parts of the value chains, and this creates, instead of closed value chains, it creates actually networks of value and what we call personal data ecosystems. And for that kind of ecosystems, it's crucial to have a mechanism for permission management. You can call it consent or other kind of permissioning. And here we see the management side on the yellow background. It's what MyData operators are creating. That means that I can get data from some data sources, and I can give permission that the same data flows to many different data using services, which are here on the blue background. And here is another type of view from the ecosystem. So there are the people, and there are several data sources and several data using services and several MyData operators connected in the ecosystem. And it's really crucial that this is not one MyData operator ecosystems, but there are many operators that are interconnected. So we want to see these network effects. We don't expect everybody to connect to one same operator, and we want to see interoperability. So it must be possible to change MyData operator without breaking things. You can think it in terms of mobile phone operators. So if I get your phone number, I can call you. I'm calling from Finnish mobile phone operator, and you probably have Korean, but magically the phone connection happens. And this is by no means accident. There has been long way of working for interconnectedness of these phone operators. But that's not the same, for example, with social media services. I cannot make Facebook chat messages flow to Google services or Apple. So we are really going looking this from this kind of creating interconnected network of operators. And for that, in MyData Global, we published earlier this year white paper, Understanding MyData Operators, and there we published this kind of a reference model, the MyData operator reference model, that describes 9 core functional elements of operators, and these elements affect how easy it is to utilize personal data, how transparent and human-centric the utilization of personal data is, and how well the infrastructure supports open competition. Here are the 9 modules. I'm not going deeper into any one of these, but I'm just saying that these are based on the actual work of roughly 50 organizations who contributed in the white paper. So there is a crucial part is the identity management. We need to know identity of the services, the companies, and the people. So whose data is going from where to where. Basically, for that we need identity management. We need the permission management. We need to be able for people to give and withdraw their permissions to use the data. We need the service management, what kind of services are connected to the network, and what are the entry, what it's needed to be entering to the personal data ecosystem. Perhaps there is value exchange, maybe it's monetary or non-monetary, but this ecosystem can support also exchanging value between people and the organizations. And data model management, of course, in the end of the days, it's not enough only to move data from one place to another. The other one needs to also understand what the data means, and these operators or the infrastructure services can do transformations between different data models. And yes, the data transfer, there needs to be secure data transfer between in the ecosystem, and some of these operators are also offering personal data storage. Some others are just connecting the data sources with the data using services. And to put these all together, we need governance support and logging and accountability, so that we can actually build this system not only to work, but to work so that it's good and well governed and human centered. So these are the MyData operators that we have been awarding so far. There are 23 of those. There is a process of self-descriptions. These operators are defining what they are doing, how they are doing, and how they are supporting the human centricity. And these MyData operators applications is still open until a couple of weeks more now this year, and next year 2021 we will open new batches, but there is the view that these MyData operator criteria will be evolving over time, so we are not stagnated in the same, but we really want to travel together the journey towards interoperability between these services, so step by step getting closer to that. You can download from mydata.org-papers, you can download this operator white paper and more general white paper of the MyData approach. So here are the links: mydata.org declaration, mydata.org papers, mydata.org Slack. This is our community. We have thousands of people there, very actively exchanging ideas and getting connected globally from many countries. And you can also join as member to MyData Global. So thank you very much. This was my presentation for you. Hope that you enjoyed. You can reach me by Twitter, and I'm very happy to answer all sorts of questions online after the presentation. What are your thoughts about this notion of PDS as a business model? Well, this is an interesting question. So as you heard, we did this self-description process for 23 MyData operators over the summer, and PDS is definitely one of the most common features that are offered by these operators. We didn't ask specifically about the business models at this time, so I cannot say in detail based on data, but my understanding is that personal data storage is nevertheless, even if it's a key feature for many, it's not really the base of the business model for most of the operators. So as far as I know, most of the operators are currently getting revenue from the organization, so not directly from the individuals paying for the services. And it might be, for example, that some of these operators offer PDS as part of the service that they offer to organizations like health insurance companies or utility companies or so forth. But yes, at this time we don't have exact details about the business models. That might come into question later on. How many or which ones of the 23 awarded MyData operators are focusing on PDS as their main businesses? Can you share understanding of how they plan to generate revenue? Yes, out of 23 MyData operators, 17 marked PDS as somewhat important part of their offering, and 10 operators said that it's a crucial part of their offering. So yes, it's pretty important to many of the operators, but as I told earlier, I don't have the data of the exact business models, unfortunately, for you to share right now. The MyData operator reference model describes 9 core functional elements of operators, and PDS is only one of the 9. What other some examples or other types of revenue flows that are awarded by MyData operators are looking at? Yes, so PDS is one of the most common features. Other one that is even more popular is permission management and identity management. Those are offered almost by all operators. And then the third corner, I think there is sort of separation between those operators that focus more on the PDS side and more on the permission management side. And this is kind of logical to think that either you build your service so that you manage the flows of data between the data sources and data using services, and in that case the permission management is really in the core of your offering. Or then you can build the offering around PDS, where you let the individual to download their data from different sources, and then it's redistributed from the PDS to others. And typically these can be combined, and more mature operators actually have both sides. But when they start building services, the new ones, they start from somewhere, and it's typically that you start either from the PDS end or from the permission management end. But all in all, both are very, very common. And then kind of the third corner that differentiates a little bit of the operators is on how much they actually focus on the service management, so kind of building catalogs of different services, etc. So those are the 3 dimensions, and the PDS and permission management is the most common dimension that makes some differentiation between the operators. And yeah, unfortunately, again, I don't have the data about the revenue models and the business models, and I should underline here that the different parts of the MyData operator reference models, it's mostly about the functionalities, what kind of functionalities the operators support, how that is being turned into business. What is the revenue model? That's quite a bit different question, and you can think it also from the perspective that who pays. So in the data personal data ecosystems, we have of course the individuals, and we have the operators, then we have the data sources and data using services, and theoretically it's possible to charge either the data sources or data using services or the individuals. But by far it's most common that the data using services are the ones that actually pay, at least at the current state. And these payments might be project based or time based subscriptions, or then based on the actual amount of data. I hope that in the coming years we could get more actual data about the business models as well. To Korean companies that are preparing to provide content management services as part of their business, please tell them why they should apply the MyData Operator Award. Okay, well, this is a very pleasant question to answer. I think the most important for any of the MyData operators so far has been really to join into the community and co-learning fast, and also kind of building the communication material, because this is a new domain. Those operators are some of them have been around for quite a long time, but still as a market it's emerging, and it's complicated sometimes to convince the customers and explain what is this all about. So the community of operators make it easier to explain that, yes, look, we are doing this, there are others who are doing the same, in different parts of the world, it's actually a thing. So kind of making it easier to communicate, and also then communicating collectively. Like recently, MyData operators responded to European Commission that is coming up with a new piece of legislation that will set some boundaries on how these data intermediaries should work. So MyData operators collectively responded. So that's kind of a collective voice. It's most of the operators, they are technically they are competing in the same field, but mostly they are not directly competing, since they are in different countries and they have a little bit different offerings. But definitely they could be competing companies, but in the context of MyData operators community, they are collaborating, so it's kind of competition. So by being part of this community, you learn fast. You get to know what's up and running. You get to share with the peers, and also strengthen your reputation. I think that's the reason to join. Plus, it's very cool group of organizations. So welcome to join.